information, 25-year and 100-year datums, water levels, when we have a full pond.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
your question is, when we input the model, we will basically assume water level out of control, and then input a rain event, and then show you the results.
There you go.
Yes. Yes, the model will absolutely do that and a whole lot more. That's actually, that map that you probably can't see in there, it's actually what that is.
Could
So-
see it, couldn't read it.
So, I mean, you know, I was trying to stick it in here just to try to show what it might look like, but we can show you a real one of what it zoomed in looks like. But those colors, that's basically what that is. That's that storm event, and then the different colors indicate the varying depths of water. So, yes, that's what the model's going to tell you.
Can't wait till it's done. Other questions from
Go ahead.
the top? The jumbo drums around here beat pretty loud and quick. The whole issue of the littorals. I have got resident after resident asking me, and I'm only asking you because maybe you've worked with them and have knowledge. Lee County didn't want to return my phone call, but now since I talked to Cecil, maybe they will. What is all of Arborwood putting in ponds exactly like ours, and they've got sod? They just came in there with, 3 weeks ago, 3 humongous semis, and they've got sod from the elevation, final elevation, down to the control elevation, and there isn't a littoral to be seen. What am I missing?
Is
City, Fort Myers.
Arborwood City? Arborwood City, right?
It's all city.
I don't know.
Because
the
my
answer.
reason for asking that is Pelican Reserve is all city, basically.
Pelican Reserve is
What's the
also all
difference?
city. I don't know how to answer that other than just enforcement, I suppose.
Well, what I'm getting to is that the county was very forceful the other day at our last meeting of the need and the justification for the littorals, which I totally agree with. But are they speaking out of both sides of their mouth?
Well, as far as that particular development goes, the county doesn't have jurisdiction over Arborwood, so I don't think they care particularly what they do in those lakes. I mean, land development code for the city and the county is similar. As far as why they're doing that in Arborwood and I don't want to say getting away with it. Why are they doing that in Arborwood? I don't know.
Well, the question's being raised, at least in Gateway Greens, as to how are they getting away with it? Last one I got was in our 2019 budget, and in our attachments to it, we have numerous CIP projects identified: water, sewer, reuse, and storm. Several of those projects, probably $8 million worth of those projects, are what I believe to be eligible for SRF financing. However, they require 2 facilities plans, one for the clean water side and one for the other. Have we asked you to put a proposal together to initiate facility planning for those projects?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Is this what those are? Is this the CIP projects that we've got identified over the next 5 years that would be eligible for SRF funding?
Those are all of the CIP projects that we were scoped to evaluate and rank and assign dollars to, essentially, basically. Some of those are more O&M maintenance type things, so not all of those projects are SRF eligible, at least in my opinion. A good chunk of them are, yes.
Several of those projects we got identified have 2020 and 2021 construction dates anticipated.
Yep.
In the CIP. In order to get those in any type of a construction phase, we have to go through planning and design.
Yeah, you're
That's
not
gonna
gonna-
take 24 months.
No, you won't. If you're looking to construct in 2020, you're not gonna do it.
2021, 2021.
2021 probably
So
should.
what do we need to do to tell you to get back to us a proposal to do the facility planning on those projects?
I mean, we just work with Chris or the rest of the board or whoever to determine exactly what projects you want to include in it, and then
But we need a plan.
put together a proposal.
We need a plan. I don't want to take and be looking at financing, debt financing, and certainly not going through any more of the bond validation deals when we've got SRF available. Let's go SRF funding on these and try to get as much of this work done with SRF low interest loans.
So we need to back into those, any of those projects, looking at the
Well, it's all
potential
of them.
stuff.
It's all of them, because you.
They're all 2021?
No, it's all the way out to 2025, but when you do the facilities planning, it's good for 5 years.
So you would want to
So
see
you
all
only do want to
inclusive?
do it once.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That
You
makes
can only
sense.
get $5 million for the projects though, right, before you go to validation?
No, it's a 5-year maturity.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry,
5-year
sorry, yeah,
maturity.
yeah, right, sorry.
Yeah. So the issue is that somehow, some way, we need to, we've got a plan, we've got a schedule. We need now to know from you what has to be done to be able to implement that schedule, which means getting the facilities plan done, getting the plans done, get the bids, and start the construction and have it done in the timeline that's shown in the CIP.
Well, and I think in conjunction with that, just looking at Chris, and building out just a 5-year plan.
That's what we
Period.
got.
Period.
That's what we have.
And include, any of these things that would potentially need, more defined facilities plan for SRF.
Well, I'd readily
I mean,
defer.
talking capital and.
Yeah, I'd readily defer this to the workshop, to at least have the discussion that we, coming out of that workshop, at the meeting after the workshop, can then tell you, proceed with the facility planning for XYZ,
And your
ABC,
scope.
scope.
Yeah.
Sure. There's a, so in that, that CIP report, there's a table of projects. I mean, we can literally just go through and circle which ones we wanna include in the facilities plan, go from there.
But we know that the ones that are R&R, pretty well, the ones up there in Tallahassee convinced me that we're not gonna get any money for that. But all the capital improvements projects, like the irrigation in the FPL, the bypass for the raw sewage force main, the new force main from here out to the wastewater treatment plant, those things that are very beneficial to us,
Sure, big capital projects.
so big capital projects. That's all I have.
Anybody else have anything for Tyler? Any questions? Okay, thank you, Tyler.
Thank you all.
Tag team. For the record, Danny Nelson with Tetra Tech. Before I go into these, one of the things also that we're gonna be working on, it's been a little bit different from the past, is actually putting together for your financing, for your budgeting, is CIP items. So you'll have that as well, and that'll help with that whole, facilities planning process, because the board will then provide input on what, for sure, of those items you want to include, so that'll help. So, in front of you, there are 2 task authorizations, and you'll have 2 at the next board meeting as well. One that Tyler had mentioned, that was for the first round of lakes for the development order, and one to look at actually the Corolla report and supporting information for the wastewater treatment and collection systems to give an opinion from our side as to what items, what we believe is if the costs are fair and if they should be contributable at all, to Gateway. So that's one of the things that I have a draft of both of those.
On these that are less than $10,000, which we have the agreement, I'd like to see them come back, but as far as I'm concerned, Chris can sign these and you're ready to go. They're under 10,000. I don't know, we need to go over, and that's the precedent we have.
I agree. I do want to say one thing to Joe's point earlier, is that the storage facility does give you that ability that you'll see vendors that may be interested at least in constructing these. You might find some information. One, you'll know what those costs are, so just to kind of point that out for Joe.
See, that's the bidding that we recommended at
Right.
the last meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we need that. You mentioned the one that's not on here that's coming is the deal with Lee County. Are you aware of what I've been talking to Chris about as to what I see as issues? I went back and I read that contract, and I do not think they are complying with that contract at all.
But what are you talking about?
They bill us, they being Lee County Utilities, they bill us for 4 things, that they are to provide us on an annual basis, the justification for those billings. 2 of them are connection fees. One's the water, one's the sewer. The sewer, they charge directly to every new ERU, $2,660. For water, they charge $2,440. My question is, when I go through and use past experiences on this, the basis of it, we have a bulk agreement with them.
You're talking about the true up now.
No. I'm talking about what they're charging on the fees. I'll get to the trip in a second. We have a bulk agreement with them. We take wastewater. We do not use one single foot of the Lee County Utilities wastewater collection system. Not one single foot. We deliver the water straight to the treatment plant. So my question is that $2,660 the same price they charge to a resident or an ERU in Lee County? Because if it is, it's got the collection system component. We shouldn't be paying 1 cent for a collection system.
To answer
How
So
is
your
that
question,
connected to task order authorization?
I was
1908.
just letting you know.
It's not on these two, it's the ones he's coming in. I'm just trying to
Well,
make sure
can we,
that.
can we get through the two that he's up here to talk about before we get on the other ones?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve. Well, do we need to make a motion since they're under $10,000?
Mrs. Flaherty,
You have an error in the,
Okay,
a grammatical error on page 38. It should be a well, not an well. Sorry. And then I do have another question,
okay.
all right, because of other things that have been brought to me. You're going to inspect this,
Yes.
okay, and you're gonna inspect it after it's completed again?
Well, we'll be inspecting, so, you have infrastructure that will be turned over, there's infrastructure as part of this that will be turned over to Gateway. So that'll be our primary focus, but we are also gonna have infrastructure that will be, maintained and retained by the school, such as your stormwater that will be, entering your system. So we're gonna primarily focus on the infrastructure that is going in place that will be dedicated to Gateway, i.e. the, water and sewer. They're gonna maintain irrigation within their own system. So we will be witnessing that as it goes in. Periodically, we're not gonna be out there full-time. But we will also, be looking at the surface water management system as it's being constructed, so that we're comfortable that whenever they're releasing water to you when it's done, it's not gonna impact your system. So that's what we're gonna be focusing the inspection on.
So when they finish their construction, you will inspect it to make sure it is
Yes,
correct?
yes, and yeah, when it's completed, yes.
That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Mr. Guy.
Thank you. Understanding that Lee County School District has built more schools than we can count, what makes you think, or why should we spend taxpayers $10,000 less a little to look over their shoulder?
I don't know that you are. I believe this will be a Chris question since it's a school, but typically you're passing those costs back onto them. And I don't know if they're subject to not because it's a school, but typically you pass those costs on to the developer. This just gives you a way to account for those costs.
This what?
It gives you a way to account for those costs. But it's a requirement of your permit criteria manual that the developer pays for those costs.
It's the same as any land development project.
For those costs, meaning.
What's in here,
your
it will be passed
work
on.
Under task order authorization 2019-08.
Yes.
And it'd be passed on probably before the connection is made, tracking service
Yes.
begins.
That's a
I think
requirement.
that's our rule as far as the utility service, they have to pay all fees before any service can be initiated.
So it's a good question, but yeah, these costs are passed on. It's a requirement of your permit criteria manual.
And is the Lee County School District aware of our permit criteria manual?
Their engineer developed the permit criteria. So, certainly hope so.
And Mr. Tinkle, in response, bringing it to the board, these task orders under $10,000, understand that, but it's really more to let the board what we're doing instead of Danny and I talking about it, and a few months later, what are you guys? It's like, so you see what's going on and when they're starting it and what they're gonna be doing.
Well, that's why, I don't think there's a need for a motion to approve. It's between you and as manager.
And I guess you'll purchase word for it.
Is there a reason you don't want a motion? Because it wasn't even a year ago that we were all combobulated up about what task
Well,
authorizations they were working on, which ones we approved, and which ones we hadn't approved. I think we'd be better off
Well, my issue was.
formally approving it, to tell you the truth.
We could do that, but we've got a deal that's for 10,000. My whole thing was, I'd much rather have them working instead of waiting them 30 days to get this going. Chris can do it as long as we are notified that that's the agreement that was reached, so we could have done this 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and all we would have here in the book is what was approved.
And it
Same
would
time.
be, it could be, this would move once Chris has written, created a purchase order and the work is on, then it could go on to the task list. It can be added on to that
Yes.
saying that it was
Right.
approved and work has begun. So we'll be kept up to date, but we're trying to streamline getting work done. So I appreciate the update, but you have to agree it'd be nice, just a one page, this was approved.
Awareness.
Yeah. And the next one is,
They're the same, I mean, they're different items, but it's the same, but they're both under the
That's just
$10,000.
compare the bids for the buildings.
Right,
Or the-
for the storage facility.
Storage facility.
So you can put that out, so. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead. Under the attorney's list, task list, it says that we need a waiver from WCI. Do we need that waiver before we go out to bid?
No, my understanding, the purpose of this was to get pricing so you can understand what those costs are.
I concur, it's not needed before we go out for bid.
I just was curious. Thank you.
Good question.
One last question on that whole issue of the storage, following up on Joe, that we didn't talk about. What is the status of Timber Creek? Because we talked that we want to make sure that we've fired our shot before they get in, and then they prohibit us from building that facility, should we want to. What's our timeline for getting a decision to go ahead and be in a position to where Timber Creek can't nullify what we're doing?
Timber Creek got their comp plan amendment, and they're moving forward with design. They've already got their zoning approval for that area. So, they're not built yet, but they have the approval to build and the zoning completed, so we've already had to adjust our design for that.
But my question is, when do we have to be, what step do we have to take to avoid them negating or stopping what we're trying to do?
They can't stop what we're trying to do, but because they have their zoning in place, we did have to redesign part of a lot of that site to add a fence along their side and to reduce the height of lighting because it was going to be next to residential properties, things like that, which we've already done. So that part's already complete.
So we're, for the most part, clear, ready to go if we get the bids and make a decision to do whatever we're gonna do.
Yes.
district council.
Yes, we've had an opportunity to review the project task list. Some of those items are overlapped with what Chris and Danny and Tyler have already mentioned. I'm waiting some of these things, I'm just waiting for others to respond. Making some progress, I think, on the Cleaner Phase 2. I've had some conversations with the attorney for the Cleaner Property Owners Association about that partial assignment of drainage easement that would resolve that whole issue. And they've been very cooperative in talking with them all along. And again, a lot of it's just trying to nudge people along to get them to wrap up some of the documents. I think WCI is very busy doing other projects, so I will keep nudging. And if the board wishes to on this issue with regards to the RV and storage, before or after you go out to bid, I could have and check into, there's a statutory scheme for public-private partnerships, and also look at what would be appropriate for a process if the board wishes to solicit proposals for design, build, and lease back, of the RV facility.
Let's wait.
Yeah, okay, we can wait for that.
Let's wait till after the bids come in.
Yeah, the legislature has fortunately provided greater opportunity for those kind of activities, but I'll be on standby for that then. And just while we were talking also, Mr. Tinkle's question about Arborwood, I was looking at the Lee County Special Development Area Regulations for Pelican Preserve, and then looking at the Lee County regulations for littoral planting. I'll double check this, but it appears at first blush that the provisions of the special development regulations for Pelican Reserve have eliminated the littoral planting landscaping requirement otherwise applicable in the city of Fort Myers. So there's a preemption. So it appears that there's no requirement for littoral plantings in the lakes.
In the city of Fort Myers.
Fort Myers, for Pelican Reserve. in this section.
What about Arborwood?
For Arborwood,
For Arborwood?
yeah.
Did you mean Pelican Preserve?
No, Arborwood,
Scratch Pelican Preserve and all its
Yeah.
glory?
arguably. I'll double check with that.
But yet,
I'll
when
double check.
When Arborwood Phase 3 comes in, which is in Gateway, under the CDD, we're gonna have a whole totally different deal.
Well, that's.
Who's on first?
Well, it'll still be in the city of Fort Myers.
That's a big difference.
Arborwood Phase 3 is
So,
in Gateway.
So that's my initial, I'll double check all
I was
that.
thinking of the
I'll double check, it appears to be that there was a modification.
We've got a lot of littorals in this town.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Good.
Any questions for Tony?
Only thing I had was, you and I talked earlier today, Worthington Fairway Lakes, POAs. It sounds like we've not had a response back from either of the previous board members.
No, and, well, I have a voicemail message from one gentleman who said, please talk to this other lady, Paul Burnett. He called, and I will follow up with that, and I'll also keep following up with WCI to get the Tower Lake, because it's a simple quick claim deed there. And again, on the Commerce Lakes streetlight issue, there might be a solution, asking, before we even get the roadway tracked, if the board wishes to pay for those streetlights, if FPL owns those streetlights.
Well,
That might be easier.
As I told you this afternoon, I got a phone call into the guy that was one of the prior board members at Fairway Lakes. In fact, he lives down the street from me, and he's not returning my call. So I don't know if that's accidental, I might just go down there and knock on his door. But I think these guys are afraid that they're committing to something that's gonna get them in trouble. There's no risk on their part whatsoever.
I don't believe so, but again, I'm not their attorney. I can't advise them that there is not. So, at the 21st meeting, if I don't have any further results, then I'll request authorization to apply to the court for appointment of a trustee and
Go the
go
other
through that
route.
process, yes. And
Thank
come
you.
up with a budget for all those proceedings too.
Thank you.
Except for the WCI piece. I think WCI, I'm not sure why they don't want to get rid of that roadway track. That just baffles me. It's just a simple quick thing.
Anybody have any other questions for
One
Tony?
other item too, I have for Chris, the actual advertisement in the paper, I saved it for the 21st public hearing on utility rates. I know with interest that medical marijuana added right above it.
That's why he saved it. That's why he saved it. You got a number.
Get your marijuana card.
Are we clean on these advertisements and everything that's gone out, that we're not gonna get somebody coming in at the public hearing saying we've actually advertised, we're in good shape?
That public notice is fine. The one that went out with the utility building had some questions about it, but the numbers were all in there. It's just we had a variation in terminology. I think Dan Hartman was comfortable with it. Is that correct?
Yes, and we also did a large ad in the community newspaper too, and it wasn't for legal purposes, it was just for public information purposes, to get the word out.
That's the multicolor one, Chris.
Okay, that brings us to 4A, B, and C, that's the consent agenda, minutes, and financial report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Go ahead.
I had a question on the finance report. Stephen was going to look into different percentage rates for CDDs.
I'm sorry, for CDs, you mean?
Yeah, that things were becoming to the end of term. Did have we?
Yes, it's done. CDs now, just kind of an FYI, are up to pretty close to 2.75% for a 12-month CD.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items A, B, and C. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Yay. 5A, utility services true-up with Lee County.
You're on a roll, you're 30 minutes ahead of time.
Shh, don't say anything.
Jinx it.
It's up to you to hold us on task.
Your Nova Scotia should be 30 minutes behind.
We'll remember that during supervisor comments.
And we held a meeting with Lee County. We've been holding regular meetings with their finance people and customer service people, and also on some occasions bringing in their engineering staff. And it was for the 2017-2018 true-up. That's an annual cost where they assign us a percentage of their O&M on top of what we're paying for the services. And as you see, they had a report done by Corello Engineering Firm, and it's pretty stark because for 2017, they're either gonna write us a check for 48,000 or we're gonna write them a check for 87,000. And for 18, same thing, they're either gonna write us one for 3,800 or we're gonna write them one for 129,000. And that's what we discussed. I was talking to Danny about, he's generating a task order to investigate.
What does the with 1 MGD mean? I didn't get that heading.
Well, they're looking at that 1 MGD capacity, you know, that's it, where the Corello report assigns us maintenance costs for that plant expansion.
Well, this is the thing that I wrote in that email sent to you, that somewhere, something is lost. We purchased in 2003, 3,715 ERUs as part of the agreement. We then had the world-famous $1 million check from nowhere that caused us to pay them almost $1 million. We have since then been paying them what calculates out to be, by my calculations, about 1,280,000 gallons of capacity.
Correct.
At build-out, we'll need 1.5, 1.56 million gallons of capacity. They've got a plant over there that's at 2 million, expandable to 6. They can expand that as far as I'm concerned, till hell freezes over, but we're not paying for it. We paid for what we need. Why do we need any more?
Well,
That's their problem.
It's just a position that their engineer provided a report to them to base on charging us some more money.
Yeah, that's bull. They're trying to get us to subsidize their growth capacity into a plant that we don't need.
And I also addressed the question about if we are collecting the wastewater and distributing the irrigation water, why are we paying that portion of the connection fee?
Yes.
And they did recognize that question, and after the meeting followed up with an email that they're gonna get an answer pretty directly. They had to meet with some of their engineering folks.
Well, the thing I was looking for, Chris, is that I did this all the time for the city of Indianapolis. We would take, and we had bulk users all over. We would come up with a sheet of paper, usually more than one, that lists all the operation and maintenance and debt costs associated with operating that wastewater treatment plant and or water system. Came down with the estimated yearly costs. Also came up with a projection of the amount of water we were either gonna pump or the wastewater we were going to treat, 200 million, 300 million gallon a day. We divide one into another, and that would come up with what we charged for a bulk rate. In other words, right now, we're paying about $6 a 1,000 gallons for wastewater and 4 and some change for water. I have, in 15 years, not seen one document from Lee County that itemizes those costs, that when you do that math, that shows that number. And then, at the end of the year, up north, we would recapitulate all the costs that were spent, divided by the actual flow, and that was the true up. I mean, it was as simple as you could get. To me, they're making something so complicated on something so easy. I don't get it.
Well, I don't either, and that's why we
I
have
think
to write them a check.
I think it's a bunch of hocus pocus is what I think it is, but I think we need somebody on our side reviewing this, and I think, are you gonna be making a recommendation that, in addition from Danny looking at it from an engineering, somebody like Chuck and or Daryl looking at it to protect us on, these numbers with these swings are wild. That's $180,000 swing.
It's a question, and the reason Danny is putting together a task order for that, but Tetra also has a rate staff, that does that type of thing too, so I thought of one-stop shop and just let them do it. But we do have the true-up costs at about $75,000 a year built into our new rate. And the difference is, for many years, with that $1 million, they just took it from that credit. Well, now we're talking about real money.
Yeah, that credit's done.
So Dan, Tetra Tech's gonna be bringing back to the next meeting the task authorization.
Sure. And right after we had this meeting with the county, I called Danny and we talked about it and asked him to bring a task order to the board.
So you're looking at more than just the engineering perspective, you're looking at the fiscal capability that Tetra Tech offers.
Well, they have rate
Yeah, I
people
know.
too,
Yeah.
with the engineering, so that, let's say one-stop shop and let them take a look at it, and they weren't involved with our rate case, so it's just a different set of eyes on it.
This thing is annualized. What's the date that it starts? Is it calendar?
Fiscal
Sep-
year.
September 30th?
Yes, sir.
On October 1st, or within 2 weeks thereabouts, either direction, did we get a letter from Lee County Utilities showing a justification of the cost per thousand we're being billed?
No, they're using, and that's why we were having those discussions, is we don't have an invoice from them on that amount, and they weren't gonna send one over until we addressed some of these issues.
Yep, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
On your memo here in the first line, it says the same rate professionals, and then we've been talking about Tetra Tech. What's the story here? You don't have a name of the professionals who used?
Oh, we were, originally, when I put this together and we talked about it, we were looking at the same folks, Daryl Parker, who worked on our rate case,
Yeah.
you know, to work with them on it, and Dan Hartman is an engineer and an attorney, but just figured to use a district engineer for it.
So we're gonna, you wanna use Tetra Tech instead of Daryl Parker?
Daryl could do it, but like I said, when you get there's a significant engineering component involved with plant costs related to this Corello report, so it's as much of an engineering function as it is a finance function.
So there's no action on this particular item until we get the task authorization from Tetra Tech.
Well, what I was.
And if it's less than 10,000, you can just,
Right, correct, then we'll just bring it to you, but all of this has come up in the last 3 weeks, and even with the school board and the
Yeah.
inspection, there was no lag period. I mean, it was basically, hey, can you get it for the next board meeting in 2 weeks? 2 weeks out, yep.
no
Yeah,
problem.
it became serious when the IOUs are now coming in that we owe them. And I'm just not buying this. I have not seen any utilities, 40 years in this business, that anybody that does stuff like Lee County does. Never seen anything like it.
And they actually, on some previous true-ups, had a small portion of their customer service budget assigned against us. And they took that out 2 years ago.
Service,
Customer service staff allocation.
I can think of a lot of words, but service isn't one of them.
Okay, the next item is the storm drain cleaning and inspection. Page 18.
Yes. Yeah, that's, me too, and we went out to bid for the storm drain cleaning inspection. The board had budgeted $200,000, the quote came in at $198,291. And it was nice because we did have 4 bidders, a nice spread in there. We had 6 people attend the pre-con meeting, but got 4 solid bids. And our staff approval, main recommendations to approve the bid from Matt Power as the lowest and most responsive bidder in the amount of $198,201 for the cleaning and inspection project.
That's pretty close for government work.
Pretty close.
One little correction to that, Chris. The board budgeted $350,000 for storm sewer cleaning.
Right.
And we did a analysis. I'm all for going along, I think we got good bids. I would make the motion that we not only accept the, here we go again, Tony, low, responsive, responsible bidder that are best interest in all those.
Most
other
advantageous
things,
to the
most
district.
advantageous to the district.
Yeah.
Being, I believe, what, Met Tower?
Yes.
For the work that's been identified. And one other thing, I would like immediately to initiate negotiating with them a change order to incorporate all of the Gateway Greens areas that have the same 40% restriction requirement for inclusion in this project as a change order that we have previously identified as being somewhere in the neighborhood of less than $100,000. So we still have money left over.
I don't think it should be a change
Yeah, I'm
order to
concerned
this, yeah.
with that scope, because it's outside this,
There'd be a
you're adding
separate
another
bid.
area to it.
Well, we have,
Well,
we'd have to have
it's the
a
same
bid.
work. It's the same work.
I'm concerned about a change order. I mean, I know this may sound silly, but from the perspective of the bidding statutes, you're not required to bid that amount, $100,000 for me. So you don't have to
Okay,
go through
so-
the competitive solicitation. You can then authorize, Chris, as a separate motion, I would suggest, to authorize negotiating a contract, the same unit price, to do the.
I call that a change order, but I don't have a problem. I just want to take and make sure that with the monies that we had reserved out of the 350 that are available, this will wrap up basically all of Gateway with the 40% restrictions. And then we can worry about the others at a later point. So I'll revise the motion to go on ahead and approve the contract with Metower for the bid in the amount of, what, 198 and some change? That's the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, that amount was 198,201. Okay, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Then I would make a follow-up motion to authorize Chris to negotiate with Metower I'd given Chris an email back in November identifying the various segments in Gateway Greens that had not been included in this original scope of work for the 40% restriction or inclusion, and asked that we get those added to the
Authorize.
authorize him to negotiate a price.
A separate contract.
Separate
price.
contract.
And Madam Chair, if you could, if a second is made to that motion, then open it up to the floor for any public comment.
Okay.
And I'll second for discussion.
Okay. And any public comment? I'll open up the floor if anybody has a comment on that request for a proposal.
I need the repeat of the motion, please.
Seeing none, she wants a repeat of the motion. She's writing it down.
Authorizing Chris to negotiate with Metower, the low bidder.
No, just negotiate with Metower.
Metower, a contract
For additional work.
for additional work.
Well, and the
For
Gateway
a
Green,
separate-
It's basically the north portion of Gateway Greens that was not included in the original
that
project,
had restrictions of 40% or greater.
that had restrictions of 40% or greater.
Yes.
And Chris, does staff agree that this area that Ed is talking about, and I know we've discussed it before, that it meets that initial blockage requirement that we determined as a severity 1, so it would have been included in the first place?
Sure, he's looking at that 40%, and what we did on this solicitation was looked at those areas that were 40% or greater in each community, and.
So it fits in with the
for
original
residents to do
scope,
it,
however,
so-
it's left out, so adding it in as a separate agreement but attached to the phase 1 makes perfect sense, so it makes sense to me.
Tony suggested maybe adding in something to the not to exceed. If we utilize their prices, I haven't done that, but the prices I used were higher than the ones they used, so I'd go along with a not to exceed of approximately $100,000.
And that's part of the motion.
Yeah, and I'll agree to that as a second.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is Pelican Preserve post orders.
And this is a rewrite of their post orders and with Securitas for the community. And they have been working for months on this with their contractor. And Tony has been involved with it intimately. And came out with a nice product. I think some other communities might want to emulate it or look it over to use as a resource.
Yeah, they did a good job. I reviewed it. I appreciate Ron DePonte and his work on behalf of the committee also, Public Supervisor Committee. He does the grunt work and groundwork on all that.
Is there a reason the post orders aren't in here?
I don't know why the full extent isn't in there.
It was
We're in the board
saving,
book with it.
it was saving paper.
It was about 74 pages.
In my
You'll
book-
get it.
Yeah, I guess
Like
Mr.
that.
Guy may have the same thing I did. I had 2 pages in my book, right, the whole document.
The only thing we put in there was a table of contents.
I saw that.
That makes it hard for us to utilize it in another community. Here's the table of contents.
We have plenty of copies.
Yeah.
And they are very detailed.
Yes.
Yeah,
I make
and also, just for the record, what I looked at were the aspects that relate solely to the district and the operational aspects. There are other administrative operational aspects that, frankly, that's an internal issue.
Ours for Gateway Greens is in a 3-ring binder about the thick as the one you got, Bill, right there. And it took a lot of time putting that together, so this is no easy task.
Is it, are full post orders on file in your office?
Yes, sir, I have a copy and I'll be happy to get you a copy of it.
So we
I may
need
stop in,
We need
I may
a-
stop in summer
Yeah.
and look through it.
Are they copyrighted?
No.
Yes, Mrs. Flaherty.
I was gonna motion to approve the post orders for Pelican as developed by the Pelican Preserve Community Association and
Securitas.
Did they, the association approve it?
They prepared, under the contract or under the agreement the district has with the Pelican Reserve Community Association, they operate the secure access control in the gatehouse. And they've contracted with Securitas to be that vendor for access control. And Securitas worked with the PPCA and that group worked with the PPAC to develop these posters.
So they've accepted these documents?
They prepared them. And Ron Ponte and PPAC have reviewed them.
Okay, we have okay, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, new posters. Appointment of Stony Brook Advisory Committee member. And we have the member here, the new,
Yep, sure.
Joe McCulca, Chairman of the Gateway Stony Brook Advisory Committee. And we've been operating one member short when one individual stepped down. And I'd just like to introduce you, I think many of you probably already know Warren. His wife is on the other side of the door over here, right? So he does get around, and you know his wife, Vicki. In any case, Warren is a very experienced individual, was on our first board, our first HOA president back in the very beginning. He also has been very active in the community. He is on the board for the Villas, which is a sub-association. And a few years ago, when I was president, I chose him to get the committee to rewrite our documents. So he is all along an up and standing resident of Stony Brook, and I'd like for all of you to approve him for our advisory committee. And if you have any questions for Warren?
Warren, has
Anyone
anyone
guess?
coerced you or threatened you?
We'll
leave that for away board members.
Freely
It
voluntarily.
took him 10 years to decide he wasn't doing it.
Freely voluntarily knowingly entered into.
I was actually the only one attending the meeting, so they figured to even spot my
Motion to approve.
I
Second.
have a question for Joe. Go
For
ahead.
Joe.
For Joe.
Oh.
I was asked this question, okay?
Yes,
Alright.
Supervisor Flaherty, can I quit that before you?
Okay, Mr. McCullough. He lives in the Villas, that'll give you 3 people from the Villas, okay, 2 from, where was it, where do you live? Greenstone.
Greenstone.
And 1 from Pebble Brook, so there's 6 from that end of the community, and I was asked why there was 6 of that end of the community. So I said, I will approach you and ask you so that you have an answer.
And there is a concentration at the end of the community, I agree with that. I'm not sure if there's more old people living that end of the community that have the time to be able to come out here and do an afternoon meeting or whatever the subject is. We did put out an email blast a while back, looking for anybody to step up, and honestly, nobody stepped up. I actually asked Warren, because he does come to the meetings, and I asked him at one of our meetings if he would be willing to do that, and surprisingly, he agreed.
I was asked that question,
Yeah.
so I,
It was brought to my attention, and honestly, I hadn't thought about it. It certainly wasn't a concern in picking people, that's for sure.
I had no problems with Warren, but since I was asked, I figured I better ask her.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
no
McCullough.
problem. Anybody else?
Nope.
Motion to approve still on.
yeah, it is. We have a motion and a second.
Who's motioned and seconded?
My motion, Doug seconded.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Too late.
Maybe
Congratulations,
somebody out
boy.
there.
You're on the hook now, buddy.
Thank you, Warren. Congratulations. You're official.
Keep Joe in check.
And the recommendation of mass notification system.
There are 3 members.
That's serious.
Hello, my name is Leslie McTorbeck, and I'm the utility billing manager. And the agenda item on the notification system came about shortly before and after Irma. And this past year most frequently because of the water advisories that we've had to issue. And we don't necessarily have anything in place regarding mass notifications in the whole community. So the agenda item is to put information regarding moving forward with the code red system and also what recommendations or directions should be taken for having residents opt in to the service. So I also attached a couple of slides, information, just to see what we currently are doing and also all the different services that we looked at with regards to being the best option. So in regards to, I'll try to summarize what we have here, but currently we are spending a lot of time surveying and querying commercials, businesses, property managers, and HOAs. We do that 2 to 3 times a year, where we obtain information and we have to keep track of it and do a lot of data mining. So in the event that something should happen, we have a way of communicating to these individuals. However, it is really not effective if something were to happen that would affect a lot more than just 100 residents or 100 commercial businesses. So we have increased our adoption rate of emails. That's going up a little bit. And this is primarily through new customer setup, and we've had circumstances where people have been affected by low water notices and have requested to be notified. So that's increased over 45% since 2017, and that accounts to about 60% of our customers. Other than that, there's about 910 multifamily units that are completely dependent on their property managers relaying the information if something should happen, because we communicate directly to the property managers and the HOAs, and then they relay that info to the individual units. In one instance we had this prior year, we had a prearranged repair work that was gonna require water to be shut off for 4 hours and a boil water notice. And we had quite a few phone calls because 90% of the individual units were not aware. And that was primarily because they did not get the information from the property manager. It was later discovered that within 30 days of providing that notice, the property manager had left. So no one else had relayed that message to the units. So we had a lot of upset unit owners calling us, wondering what was going on. So other than that, we post on the Facebook and website and post signs in the area that are affected. So currently we have no method of mass notification. We follow a lot of the same business practices that other utilities do of our size. So we're pretty much doing similar to what everyone else is doing. The larger cities and communities are doing Code Red, so they have the same service. Other than that, they do a third-party vendor. So our main focus was primarily to make sure that in the event that we lose power, internet, and phone, we have an ability to send out notifications. We've had that instance occur just last month when we lost internet and phones for 2 days, I believe. We had no means of communicating. It was complete chaos in the midst of having to get public hearing notices approved. So it was quite a struggle. So in the event that we did have an emergency or something happens, it's crucial that we're able to deliver those notices when we don't have internet. Another option in a focus area was also to make sure that we gave the residents and individuals the ability to opt in and to decide how they want to receive the notices. So whether it's text, email, or phone, and whether they want general notifications or emergency only. And the third big area is minimizing staff time in data mining and organizing the information. So with those focus areas, it was primarily Code Red that kind of addressed all those issues. But with that, I did also include the other areas that we looked into. So we looked into software in-house. So did we have the capabilities of doing this internally, and we don't. Our billing system is a bit not antiquated, but it's really built for smaller utilities, so we don't have the capabilities of calling or texting en masse. To do so, we would have to increase to another platform, and that would result in high conversion costs and also additional hardware for servers to be capable of sending out notifications. So there's a little bit of a breakdown on the cost per minute for phone and text. So we didn't really feel that this was an option. It would be more of, it would take a lot of time to kind of execute a software conversion, and the cost just wasn't what we felt was in what we should do. So next, this is just a comparison so you can kind of see the annual cost if we were to issue a notifications through in-house software. So 5,400 phone calls and 5,400 text messages would cost roughly around $3,000 for the year. And that's on the left. On the right shows if we increased text message only to 20,000, and that would be an annual cost of $4,200 a year. So those are the built-in mandatory FCC regulation fees, as well as the cost for inbound and outbound text messages or call. This system also allows for, if we wanted to have customers be able to pay their bill over the phone, it would also give them that ability. That's the 25 cents balance inquiry per minute. So with this type of system, it just offers a lot more features.
Nancy,
Go ahead.
just to be clear, the solution that we're looking at gives us the ability to do mass notifications, both for